Thank you. Thank you. I am a mother to two beautiful little boys. My first baby, my sweet little girl, is dead. She died suddenly and without any explanation. When the doctor told me that she had died, she never said, "I'm sorry." She never comforted me. She never offered me support or resources. Instead, I was sent home to process my grief alone. I never found out why or how she died. I don't know whether it was something I had done, whether it was something I hadn't done, or whether the doctor made a mistake in her treatment. I was never even asked whether I wanted to know. She was dead, and that's all I was told. In the aftermath, when I told people, their words crushed me. These things just happen sometimes. It was probably for the best. There must have been something wrong with her. This is my story. It is heartbreaking, inhumane. Who would treat a grieving mother this way? I lost my baby at 8 weeks and 5 days of pregnancy. I didn't find out until my 11-week ultrasound, when I stared at a blank screen instead of a moving, thriving baby. This loss has profoundly changed me, and yet society tells me that I am not supposed to grieve the loss of that baby or to talk about it. There are many different models of care, some of which handle miscarriage with more compassion, but that was not my experience, and that is not the experience of hundreds of thousands of families. So I am here today as a truth teller, to confront the unmentionable, to give voice to the unspoken, to confront one of the last taboos in our culture. I am here to change the way we experience miscarriage and pregnancy loss. So first, let's discuss what miscarriage is. Miscarriage is the loss of an embryo or fetus before it is able to survive independently. After 20 weeks gestation, the loss is considered a stillbirth. Now, I want to be clear that this is not about a woman's right to choose. This is my story, and my baby was wanted, even longed for. As a society, we've been taught that pregnancy loss and stillbirths are routine, and given the statistics, they are. Miscarriage happens in around 1 in 4 known pregnancies, with 85% of those happening in the first trimester. 1 in 4. Look around you. Look at this room. How many of you know someone who has miscarried? Nearly 2,000 of you here today have been impacted by miscarriage or pregnancy loss. But do you talk about it? Do you know what actually happens during a miscarriage? So why is that? It is because we are taught to believe that pregnancy loss doesn't matter. Because these losses are so common, we're taught to treat it as a routine part of pregnancy, that it is best for things to go unsaid. The loss is dismissed, especially if it happened in the first trimester. At least you can try again. Miscarriage is everywhere. We just don't always see it. We choose to avoid it because it is so incredibly hard. Dead babies brings up a primal fear in most of us. So as a society, we have made an unspoken agreement not to talk about it. Please close your eyes. I want you to listen to something that most of you have heard before.
It's just a shadow away. It's just a shadow away. Rape, murder, yeah. It's just a shadow away.
voice of Mary Clayton, the legendary singer that helped shape the iconic song by the Rolling Stones, "Gimme Shelter." Most of you probably don't know that she was summoned in the middle of the night wearing a bathrobe and hair curlers to be a part of that track. She delivered the performance of a lifetime. She was also pregnant. The morning after she recorded that song, she miscarried. In interviews, she attributes the loss to the strain she put on her body, pushing the heavy studio doors and reaching to hit those incredible vocal peaks. Can you imagine the pain and the guilt, feeling like you sacrificed your baby for one of the most powerful songs in history? The truth is, she doesn't know why she lost that baby. No one knows why most of these losses happen. The word miscarriage and the way we use it make it seem like it's something easy to dismiss. Painful, sure. Sad, yes. But traumatic, frightening, life-changing, no. That's not what the word implies, and that's not what we are led to believe. So imagine being taught that this is an event to be glossed over, and then to actually experience it. The doctor squeezed the cold jelly onto my stomach and placed the ultrasound wand on it. The screen was black. She moved the wand around trying to find the baby, but there was nothing but black. In that moment, when I realized what was happening, my body let out a howl, a sound that only profound, devastating grief can produce. She was gone. While processing the shock of that moment, I was told that I had 3 choices to handle the physical loss. I could go to the hospital for a medical procedure. I could wait until my body went into labor naturally, or I could use medication to start the process. I was alone in the dark when my water broke. My doctor hadn't explained what would happen, so I didn't know what was happening. When I realized what it was, I began sobbing. I realized that I was going through labor, but at the end of it, I would have nothing. I sat on the bathroom floor, bleeding for hours. And then finally, my baby came out. My doctor hadn't told me that I would be able to identify her little body. I was completely unprepared for the shock and trauma of that moment. Seeing her tiny body in the toilet, pulling her out to look at her. This tiny piece of flesh was my daughter. And then I was faced with another choice I didn't know I would be making. What was I supposed to do with her? Was I supposed to pull her out and throw her in the trash? Was I supposed to flush her down the toilet? If someone had told me what to expect, had walked me through what would happen and the decisions I would have to make, I could have made better ones. I didn't know. So I have to live with the regret of flushing my firstborn baby down the toilet. She didn't get a proper burial. I told her goodbye. I sobbed, and I begged her to forgive me. In the wake of my miscarriage, I expected to be able to move on and return to some sense of normalcy. I was unprepared for the emotional toll that the experience would take. For months and months, I would break down in tears, blinded by pain and guilt. It impacted my work, It impacted my marriage, and I questioned my entire sense of self. I had considered myself a strong woman. I had been through pain and trauma before. But this destroyed me. I felt like a failure. As a mother, the one thing I was supposed to do was protect my baby, and I didn't. I couldn't keep her alive. Think about the word, miscarriage. I miscarried. I did something wrong. The word itself implies responsibility, failure. I failed my baby. I failed my partner. I failed myself. I failed at doing the one thing women are supposed to be able to do. At no point after my miscarriage was I offered any support or counseling. There was no follow-up call. Not even acquaintances who had gone through a miscarriage offered support. I was alone and drifted into a deep depression. Not only had I failed to keep my baby alive, but now I also couldn't just move on as society expected me to. Even my grief was a failure. What happens when we disregard our trauma and grief? The grief doesn't disappear because we don't talk about it. It just gets buried. We isolate one another. We dishonor our experience. Miscarriage is part of the universal human experience, but that doesn't mean it is not a profound, devastating loss. It took me a long time to accept that I had changed forever. I wanted to go back to the joyful, unaware, naive self I was before it happened, but I can't. Every piece of who I am carries that baby with me. I know grief. I know the pain of having to make unimaginable choices. There is a knowing for those of us who have experienced the loss of a child. It is a heartbreak that we almost can't speak. But talking about it is what helped me to heal. Saying out loud what happened, not glossing it over, not dismissing it, that is what helped me heal. It was painful and scary to talk about, but it was also true. What would happen if we all agreed to tell the truth about miscarriage and pregnancy loss? What if we all talked about it? Talking about miscarriage is what this TED Talk is about. That is why I'm here today. Miscarriage isn't different than any other trauma or grief that we experience. It's just that we've been made to believe that it is. But what we need is the same. In the days and weeks after I lost my baby, I just wanted to be seen as a mother, for my grief to be seen. I wanted somebody to ask me about her, to ask about what happened in the dark that night. I wanted someone to tell me that it wasn't my fault and that I hadn't done anything wrong by loving her, even in the earliest days of my pregnancy. Talking about the loss of a baby is scary. It is painful, but we owe it to one another to acknowledge this loss. We can't change the pain of the experience, but we can change the isolation, the fear, the misinformation. Don't be afraid to have these conversations. Don't be afraid to ask about these babies. My baby matters. Her life wasn't meaningless. I will always grieve the sweet possibility of who she would have become, of what her little hand would feel like in mine, of what it would feel like to brush the hair off her face. I grieve the loss of who I would have become as her mother. My little girl matters, even though she was lost in the first trimester of my pregnancy. She matters. And for all of you in this room who have never allowed yourselves to grieve the loss of a baby, your story matters too. They all do.